Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. The sky cracked open above Silurith. The Hirathi capital, once a sprawling marvel of crystalline architecture built into the cliffs of Varn 9, was dying. A white-hot beam tore through the city's northern sector, turning towers into columns of flame and smoke. Shockwaves rippled down avenues once teeming with life, shattering windows and hurling debris like shrapnel. The protective dome, one of the last, buckled under the force, its iridescent surface flickering, then collapsing in a burst of failing energy. Screams echoed between stone and steel. Another impact shook the earth. The ground split in Market Quarter Theta, swallowing a tramline and half a dozen storefronts. Above, sleek obsidian ships circled in low orbit, their weapons platforms glowing, calculating. They moved in silence, save for the aftermath they left in their wake. Siren tones wailed from towers now hollowed by heat. Emergency beacons pulsed red against a darkened midday sky. In the streets, panic surged like a tide. Hirathian civilians, tall, narrow-shouldered bipeds with bark-textured skin and luminous yellow eyes, ran with bundled children and precious keepsakes. Their voices, melodic in peace, now broke in panic as they funneled into subterranean shelters. A father stumbled, clutching his daughter. Blood streamed from a gash across his chest, but his grip didn't falter. Around him, others fell, struck by debris or simply overtaken by the chaos. Medics, pale-scaled and silent, worked with grim focus, knowing their work delayed the inevitable. Inside the central defense spire, Councillor Derek Malsin stood before a fractured holomap, one hand pressed to his brow, the other clenched at his side. The map was red entirely. Every district, every defense satellite, offline, destroyed. "Confirm again," he said, voice ragged. The officer beside him, younger, shorter, sweat streaking the sides of his dark, chitinous face, gave no preamble. "We've lost the final shield array over the central ring. Orbital batteries are gone. Southern bunkers report full saturation. Civilian shelters are holding, but for how long, Counselor?" Malsin exhaled, the breath quivering. His mandibles twitched as he turned to the others seated at the circular table. 13 figures, all elder males, former generals, scholars, religious leaders, sat in silence. General Therum Jek, broad, scarred, and still wearing a half-burnt uniform, pushed away from the table. "It's over." The silence deepened. A flicker of defiance lit in Kovalreth's eyes. "No!" snapped one of the scholars, Elder Kovalreth. "We can rally, fall back to the eastern valleys, merge with resistance cells." "There are no valleys left," Jek said flatly. "The planet is already a tomb. All that remains is when the smoke stops rising." Malsin leaned forward. "We are not entirely without recourse." The others looked at him. The silence thickened. "Below the city," he continued, voice steady now. "In the old catacombs beneath the Temple of the 9 Flares." Elder Reth stiffened. "You cannot mean—" "I do." "That device is sacred," spat Reth. "It was not meant for desperate hands. It was a gift from the Ascended Ones." "It was a warning," Jek cut in, "and we ignored it. We held on to stories and myths because they were more comforting than facts. That obelisk wasn't placed by gods, Reth. It was left by them." The word hung like lead. "Gather the circle," Malsin said, turning from the table. "We're going down." The entrance to the temple had once been a place of pilgrimage. Tall stone columns encased in glimmering mineral resin, designed to catch sunlight and refract it into spectral rainbows across the inner sanctum. Now the air reeked of smoke, and the floor was littered with dust from the tremors above. They passed through without ceremony. The descent into the lower catacombs was steep, cut into the mountain's bone centuries before the city was born. Torches ignited as the antechamber's sensors detected their presence. Blue flame flickering along the wall grooves, revealing ancient carvings, spirals, star charts, war. And at the center of the chamber, the obelisk. It stood 3 meters tall, jet black, matte, but patterned with hairline etchings that pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if remembering light from another time. Around its base, 3 concentric rings sat embedded into the floor, bronze, tarnished, engraved with text no Hirathi alive could read. Malzahn stepped forward, the circle of elders watching in heavy silence. "I read the scroll once," he said. "The original. Transcribed from the survivors of the silent Exodus. They spoke of a message left behind by the ones they called the Lost Warborn. Creatures of fire and purpose. Their name was short, sharp, humans." No one spoke. "They left this," Malzahn continued, "with a single instruction. Do not use unless freedom is dead." Elder Reth's voice cracked. "We don't even know what it does." "No," Malzahn admitted, stepping toward the first ring. "But we know it was left for moments like this." He placed his hand against the outermost ring. It was cold. Too cold. "Counselor!" A voice called from behind, but it was too late. Malzahn pressed. The ring shuddered, moved. It rotated clockwise with a grinding sound, the grooves lighting up in amber light. The second ring began to glow. Another hand. Elder Zoran moved forward, silent, tall, skeletal. He pressed the middle ring. This one turned slower, pushing back slightly before giving way. The light became red. The innermost ring awaited. Then General Jek stepped forward and placed his hand firmly. The moment his palm touched the surface, the room fell silent. Even the tremors from the bombardment above seemed to still. The third ring rotated. With a low hum, the obelisk surged with light from bottom to top. Not in pulses, one smooth ascending wave, like a circuit completing for the first time in millennia. A loud crack echoed through the chamber. From the apex of the obelisk, a thin rod emerged, metallic and spiraled, and released a silent pulse. It shimmered upward, phasing through rock, steel, and sky without resistance, before vanishing into the stars. It vanished within seconds. Silence reclaimed the chamber. The 3 rings, now glowing with soft red light, locked in place. Far above, in orbit, several ships of the Coalition detected the surge. Their analysts flagged it as a high-energy burst on an unrecognized frequency. Inside the command bridge of the Coalition dreadnought Atanax, Admiral Vor Talam reviewed the signal with a smirk. His armor gleamed under the sterile white lights, a sharp contrast to his hairless purple-gray skin and elongated jaw. He glanced at Lieutenant Krieve, a young insectoid officer from the Gresh caste, who was blinking nervously. "Ritual broadcast," Talam said with amused disdain. "Last gasps from primitives who still believe in prophecy." "They used a deep-band subspace channel," the lieutenant murmured. "Unregistered, untraceable." Talam waved him off. If they had a real fleet, they'd have used it by now. He returned to the strategic map. "The bombardment continues. Let's end this within the day." Deep in the temple chamber, the red light of the obelisk faded to a dim pulse. Malzahn looked up. No change. No answer. No sound from the heavens. Just the still, musty air. General Jek stood beside him. "That's it?" Malzahn nodded slowly. "They won't come," Reth whispered. "It was a myth." "Maybe," Malzahn said, voice quiet. "Or maybe they left because they knew what was coming. Maybe they knew we would need them again, that all of us would." The red glow pulsed once more. Slower now. Above, the bombardment resumed. "They didn't know what the artifact would do," Malzahn murmured. "Only that it was meant to be used." The ground shook again. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the chamber echoed softly, as if remembering the words itself. When freedom was dead. The pulse registered at Aero 347 Standard Galactic Time. Inside Orbital Command Station Egeron 4, the data came as nothing more than a flicker, an irregular spike in subspace resonance across a decaying frequency band. No alarms were triggered, no protocols were breached. It was catalogued, queued, and flagged for review. Lieutenant Cale Voss, a young technician from the Ulari species, tall and narrow-eyed, with mottled skin and scaled cheek ridges, glanced at the anomalous readout once, twice, then dismissed it with a tap of his clawed fingers. Another pulse from a dead relay, or a decaying wormhole fragment most likely. He didn't bother to tell anyone. Minutes later, the pulse replicated, stronger, more defined, like a note held too long. Inside the Coalition flagship Atanax, Admiral Vor Talum stood before a wide holographic projection of Varn 9, its atmosphere marked with scar tissue from continuous orbital strikes. He had not moved in hours. His pale violet skin gleamed under the bridge's harsh white lights, the ridged plates across his skull catching faint glints from the command displays. His fingers rested calmly on the rail, observing, calculating. "Their outer districts have collapsed entirely," reported Commander Yarek Thun, stocky and wide-necked, a Kravari tactician bred for siege logistics. "Civilian clusters have been reduced to heat signatures, no return fire, no liftoff attempts." "And the central districts?" Talum asked, his voice low, deliberate. "Still shielded, fragmented, but active. Most likely those remaining are gathered in the capital caverns. They've nowhere else to run." Talum nodded once. "Continue until atmospheric collapse is total. Let the dust settle over their monuments. The less rubble we need to crush, the better." Then a soft tone echoed across the bridge. An alert. Commander Thun turned, eyes narrowing. "Unregistered subspace activity. Origin, planetary surface. Frequency, unknown." Another tone followed, a low-pitched modulation, repeating. Thun raised a brow. Could be a distress signal. Talum didn't turn. Or a death chant. "Should I flag it for signal intel?" A pause. Talum allowed a faint smile to touch the corners of his mouth. "No, it's nothing. Just a superstition cast into the void. Let them howl to the stars before their end. I want bombardment completed in 36 hours." Understood. No one questioned him. 35 hours later, the silence broke. It began with a ripple. At the outer edge of the Varn system, just beyond the orbital reach of Coalition forward posts, space began to deform. Subtle distortions, like tension pulling through vacuum. Gravity well sensors pinged faintly, then louder. Instruments recalibrated. A pattern emerged. Not random, unnatural. From the central data spine of Atanax, a new AI, designation Syra 7, spun up a deep space mapping sequence, collating live telemetry from over 200 vessels. The Coalition fleet, massive and coldly efficient, was spread across orbit in gridlock precision. Syra 7 analyzed the gravitational discrepancies. It initiated spatial scans across 180 degrees of parallax and determined the anomaly was growing. A comtech on the auxiliary station, a Varelian female with translucent skin and spider-thin limbs, looked up. "Admiral, something's coming through." Talum turned, his smile gone. "Define something." "Unknown mass signatures, multiple. No transponder codes, no spectral emissions. They're not broadcasting anything." On the central screen, space warped in silence. Thin ripples bending starlight like heat over metal, too smooth to be natural. 1, then 3, then dozens, 58 contacts within seconds, then over 200. They arrived in perfect formation, silent, no flashes of sublight engines, no ripple of faster-than-light exit burns, just presence, mass and motion where nothing had been. Bridge silence fell like a cut cable. Talum's breath froze. For a fraction of a second, his pupils dilated, just enough for the crew to wonder if he recognized something. His voice, low but tighter now. "Are they Hyrathian?" The tech shook her head. "Negative. No known IFFs. No emissions. Hull designs are unfamiliar. Composite readings are inconsistent. Bring up telemetry overlay. Have Sierra cross-reference galactic archives. I want identifications. The lights dimmed momentarily as Sierra processed the command. In the background, the tactical table displayed the objects encroaching steadily into the system. They moved with surgical symmetry, no drift, no reactionary positioning. Their exterior forms shifted subtly in real time, as if adaptive to their surroundings. "They're not aligning toward the planet," Thune muttered. "They're aligning toward us." Talem's fingers clenched against the railing. "Run full-spectrum scans. Wake the defensive batteries. I want confirmation of intent." Still, no signal came from the newcomers. No hail, no warning, no sound. Inside the data core, Sierra's systems began to slow. The AI paused its current search protocol and started over. Twice. Unusual. It attempted a deep match scan, probing the lowest layers of archive. Forgotten conflicts, sealed treaties, abandoned alliances. Then the system paused, glitched. The lights dimmed again. One of the status bars froze mid-cycle. A dull hum filled the bridge, as if the ship itself had started listening. Sierra's core loop restarted, then stalled. Sierra halted its voice functions, then rebooted core linguistic processes. Another pause, then partial match found. Talem stepped forward. Display. On the bridge screen, one entry unfolded. Species, human. Classification, extinct. Last known activity, epoch 999 ZT4. Treaty presence, null. Threat index, classified status, extinct. Perceived capability, unsurpassed. Response protocol, locked. Peril assessment, The voice stuttered. The text looped, reformatted, blinked, then froze. The final line displayed, steady now, rendered in red across the bridge wall. Species, humans. Status, extinct. Peril level, unquantifiable. Sierra's voice, now metallic and flat, rebooted once more. A pause. Then, species, humans. Status, extinct. Peril, incalculable. The room held still, cold, and in the space beyond the stars the black ships waited. A single human vessel moved, just one. Among the hundreds in perfect formation, it was the only anomaly, its trajectory shifting by mere degrees as if adjusting for gravitational drift. The movement was minuscule, almost imperceptible, but it rippled through the coalition ranks like a gunshot. Inside the Atnax, Admiral Vor Talem stood motionless, hands gripping the railing before the tactical display. Sweat clung to the inner seams of his collar. Around him, the bridge crew worked in absolute silence, eyes locked on feeds that told them nothing, and yet said everything. "They're not scanning," reported Lieutenant Kriv, antennae twitching in confusion. "No emissions, no signal sweeps, passive positioning only." But what?" Talem snapped. "They're adapting," Kriv said, his voice brittle. "Each vessel corrects its alignment in micro-intervals. It's not formation flying. It's choreography, like writing a forgotten language in space." Talem's plates flexed along his skull. On the main display, the fleet of black, angular ships drifted into a curved wall between Varn 9 and the Coalition. Their shapes were unnatural, ever-shifting. Where one moment they resembled elongated spears, the next they compacted, narrowed, bent the light around them. Silent, watching, judging. No demand had come, no ultimatum, no message, just presence. Long before that moment, the galaxy had burned. Flashes of history pulsed through fragments of corrupted memory, battlefields carved into the crusts of planets, skies shattered by fusion detonations, and starships the size of cities cutting through space like blades through cloth. The humans had been everywhere. They had rewritten maps not with conquest, but with sheer inevitability. Their alliances had been few and short-lived, their enemies countless. They didn't spread, they intervened. When they arrived, power shifted. And when they disappeared, the galaxy exhaled. But they hadn't vanished in defeat. They had folded away. One by one, human megastructures had gone dark. Stations collapsed inward and were consumed by exotic matter. Cities lifted from planetary crusts and ascended, breaking orbit under silent propulsion. Entire fleets migrated toward uncharted vectors and blinked out of detectable space. They left behind no signal, no trace, no wreckage, only an absence. And in that absence, the galaxy reorganized itself. The strong formed councils, leagues, coalitions. They wrote new treaties, built hierarchies, suppressed volatility. And when lesser species resisted integration, they were guided or crushed. The pattern repeated, until the obelisks woke, in temples, in archives. In the hearts of species no one remembered to fear. Silent machines buried for millennia, activated in synchrony. No sound, no fanfare, just a signal, tight band, directional, encoded in human logic and ancient fail-safes. A signal received, a protocol triggered, return authorized. Back in orbit above VAR-9, the Coalition fleet was unraveling, quietly, invisibly. "Admiral, we're losing shield cohesion across segment Delta and Epsilon," reported Thune. "Localized disturbances are interfering with power calibration." Talam's eyes didn't move. "Explain." "We don't know," Thune admitted. "There's no impact signature, no hack, no malware. It's like the field generators are rejecting synchronization, as if something else is setting the phase." "Impossible," Kriv muttered. "Our shielding tech is quantum locked. External modulation should be—" "Show me," Talam barked. On the nearest display, a diagnostic schematic unfolded. 2 cruisers, Dravik and Elgarin, were marked in yellow. Their shield grids pulsed unevenly, shimmering and flickering in waves that followed no internal algorithm, and then one dropped completely. Not collapsed, disengaged. "No weapons fire," Thun whispered. "No electronic spike, just gone." Talam's hands curled into fists. "Get me a channel. All frequencies. Broadcast demand for identification." Kriv hesitated. "Sir, now." Across the void, the signal was sent. "This is Admiral Vor Talem of the Galactic Coalition Fleet. Identify yourselves. You are entering a protected orbital combat zone. This is a violation of Article 9. Respond immediately." Silence. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Talam's command crew began to glance at each other, subtle movements of uncertainty and tension. 30 seconds. One of the junior officers shifted his weight, then quickly froze, as if afraid even movement might trigger a response. Then, finally, the response came. One ship, centered in the human line, broadcast a single return pulse. Not a voice, a file. It unfolded across the Coalition's comms like a verdict. Treaty Era 1 Delta. Record confirmed under Provisional Interference Protocol. Call received. Freedom compromised. Intervention authorized. Execution in progress. The message ended. No flare, no burst. Just a silence that didn't feel empty. Then came the collapse. No modulation, no emotion. A mechanical delivery wrapped in absolute certainty. Commander Thun looked up from the message feed, his throat dry. That's not a warning, it's a sentence. Another ship flickered, its silhouette distorted briefly, just for a frame. A shimmer of something too complex for visual processing. On the Atanax's bridge, emergency readouts began to light up. Shields collapsing on Vossar, Niljek, and Barum, all 3 showing catastrophic resonance mismatches. "How is this possible?" Kriv stammered. Talam said nothing. "It's not a weapon," Thune murmured. "They're not attacking us. They're disabling us." Across the tactical map, Coalition ships began to show errors in propulsion sync. Targeting matrices cycled endlessly, unable to lock. Communications between vessels looped into incoherent echoes, fragmented, spliced, misrouted. Even Atanax's internal AI stuttered, processing cycles looping in silence, then cutting off entirely. The ship had gone deaf to itself. Something, someone, was reprogramming the space around them. Talum finally spoke. "Prepare to fire." "No targets acquired, sir," Creve said, nearly breathless. "Our targeting systems won't hold lock." "They're blind," Thun whispered. "Sir, they're blinding us without firing a shot." Talum turned toward the display. The human fleet remained motionless, silent. Their hulls absorbed light like event horizons, not attacking, just present, waiting. And for the first time in years, Admiral Vortalum did not speak. The war wasn't ending. It was being overwritten. He simply stared into the black wall of ships and saw his war unravel in silence. The shot wasn't authorized. Aboard the Kavreth, a medium-class coalition frigate stationed along the second orbital tier, Sub-Commander Irath Vulik shouted orders that were either misheard or ignored. A junior weapons officer, nervous, green-scaled, four-fingered and soaked in sweat, slammed his palm against the trigger surface. A pulse cannon flared to life. A brilliant lance of energy burst from the vessel's forward arc, ripping across the void toward the nearest human vessel. Coalition protocols immediately flagged the shot as unauthorized. The fleet-wide channel erupted in overlapping voices. "Who fired? Stand down! Identify who fired, now!" The human ship didn't flinch. It didn't move. The pulse crossed the space between them, seconds only, but the tension twisted reality itself. The projectile never reached its target, because there was no impact, no detonation, no countermeasure. Instead, a line appeared, thin, clean, oblique. The Kavreth's hull split down the center, not torn, not melted, separated, like a line erased from a page. A cold silver filament, so faint it might have been a shadow, extended from the nearest human vessel for just a moment. Then it vanished. There was no sound, no light, no recoil. Just the front half of the Kavreth drifting forward, slowly peeling away from the rear. Atmosphere vented in an elegant arc, bodies caught mid-motion, still strapped to their posts. On the Atanax, Admiral Vortalum didn't move. His gaze locked on the tactical display, where the icon for the Kavreth flickered, then dimmed. "Do not return fire," he said. But it was too late. The humans were already moving. The formation, once static and aligned like a monument, began to shift. Units rotated inward, spacing calculated to the meter. Some vessels ascended out of the orbital plane, while others dipped low, creating overlapping fields of influence. It was a maneuver, but it felt like something else, like architecture being built in motion. Lieutenant Creve's voice cracked through the silence. New heat signatures across the human fleet, low-yield EM surges, vector patterns unknown. "They're warming systems," said Commander Thun, plates drawn tight, not weapons, processors. As the humans repositioned, new anomalies surged through coalition systems. Sensors began to spin, literally. Tactical readouts looped endlessly, rotating displays into recursion. Artificial gravity fluctuated on 4 dreadnoughts. Internal comms sparked and cut. A command post aboard the Gorellan reported its own tactical AI had shut down mid-cycle and refused to reboot. "Someone is inside our systems," said Creve. "But there's no intrusion protocol, no signature." Admiral Talum stared at the map. His own display fuzzed at the edges, as if the simulation couldn't keep up with what was being rendered. "They're not in our systems," he murmured. "They're in the space around it." Across the fleet, bridge crews fought a losing battle against ghosts. Manual overrides failed. Power grids blinked. Auto-targeting spun in frantic circles. That's when the human intervention began. It wasn't missiles, nor beams, just precision. A single drone, barely a meter across, darted from a human destroyer. No visible propulsion. It moved like a thought, diving into the engine wash of the coalition frigate Efferson. Moments later, a cascade of plasma bloomed from its starboard stabilizer. The ship rotated out of formation, helpless, trailing vapor. No explosion, no counterattack. just silence. Another drone, a triangle of shifting metal, embedded itself against the hull of the Gerenvak. It vibrated. That's all. Then the ship's comms died. Engines froze. Lights went out. It didn't fall. It simply drifted, crippled. Still, no demands, no broadcasts, no threats. Just action, deliberate and absolute. And for the first time, the coalition realized what it meant to be seen and not heard. Admiral Talem gripped the edge of the display, the ridged plates of his hand flexing under strain. "Where are they targeting?" Thune replied, grim. "Not weapons, not life support. They're crippling maneuvering systems, communications, field integrity nodes. They're carving out our capacity to coordinate." A ripple of motion passed through the human fleet. For the first time, they expanded. Not aggressively, deliberately. Units moved outward into a sphere. Each one covered another coalition vessel with overlapping sight lines. More drones launched. They didn't fire. They landed, softly, like insects on glass. Coalition crew scrambled. Some tried to shoot them off with hand weapons. Some vented sections. It didn't matter. Where the drones landed, systems went dark. Entire cruisers were reduced to sensor ghosts in under a minute. From orbit, Varn 9 flickered beneath the storm. Fires still raged across its surface, but now the planet looked up and saw silhouettes overhead. Jagged, angular, silent. The humans had not invaded. They had intervened. On the bridge of the Atanax, Commander Thune whispered, "We can't fight them." Talem didn't respond. One remaining coalition battleship, the Varenik, attempted to re-engage, charging a forward cannon. The system stuttered, fired off course. The round spun uselessly into the upper atmosphere of the planet below. A reply came instantly. From the void, a lattice of red light flickered. It didn't strike the Varenik. It struck space, right in front of it. The entire field ahead collapsed. Gravity twisted. The Varenik lurched back, its own momentum arrested mid-flight, redirected by something invisible. No force, no impact, only correction. "They're rewriting physical constants," Kreve said, eyes wide. "That wasn't a shield. That was spatial denial." Talem's voice was flat. "And yet they haven't fired a single shot. No explosions, no flame, just entropy." Across the coalition fleet, ships either powered down, spiraled out of position, or were surgically rendered irrelevant. The war had begun, and still, the humans said nothing. The sky above the Hirathi capital was no longer dark. It glowed, not with fire, but with motion. Angular shadows slid across the smoke-choked clouds, too precise to be natural, too fast to be counted. Children stood at the mouth of the lower shelter tunnels, eyes wide, arms held tightly by parents who couldn't decide whether to run or kneel. Ash drifted over the ruins of Silurith like falling snow, and high above, something broke the atmosphere. It didn't roar. It didn't burn. It shimmered. A single human fighter streaked across the sky in a blur of silver and blue, trailing no exhaust, emitting no sound, just a ripple, like the air itself bending out of respect. Then a second, then 10, then a formation of them, flying in lattice, diamond spiral, shapes that didn't make sense to the eye but pulsed with rhythm. And below, on a shattered balcony overlooking the western district, Elder Reth Koven, one of the last surviving Temple Fathers, fell to his knees. His bark-textured hands trembled as he pointed to the sky, voice cracking under the weight of 1,000 retellings that had never felt real. "The gods came in machines," he whispered, "and they were waiting for us." The words echoed across the fractured plaza, picked up by others too stunned to move. Behind him, a child let go of his mother's hand, stepping into the red glow reflecting from the clouds, mouth parted in awe. "Are those the ancients?" he asked. No one answered. Because there, above Varn 9, myth had taken form. The coalition fleet, once dominant, was breaking, From the upper vantage points of Celerith's still-standing spires, the Hirathi could see the enemy formation dissolving, dreadnoughts spinning out of sync, destroyers drifting off-axis. The sky, once crowded with fire, now looked like a field of broken glass, and threading between them, with impossible agility, came the human interceptors. They didn't emit heat. They didn't register on surviving defense systems. Where they passed, coalition ships faltered, one losing its helm control, another sputtering and spiraling into low orbit before being caught mid-fall by some invisible field. But there were no kills until the coalition tried to run. It started with a trio of frigates burning hard toward the outer atmosphere, breaking formation in a desperate arc. They fired decoys, flared chaff, everything they had left. It didn't matter. From above, 9 human fighters descended like streaks of starlight. There was no chase. They passed once, just once, over the escape corridor. The frigates slowed. No weapons struck them. No explosion bloomed. But each ship's engines flickered out simultaneously, as if a single thought had cut through their command cores. They coasted now, cold and powerless. Then the humans were gone again. Only trails remained. Blurred distortions, fading arcs across the sky. The Hirathi watching from the shelters below didn't understand what they'd seen, only that it was too fast for their minds to grasp, too silent to feel safe, and too perfect to doubt. In one of the subterranean infirmaries, an elder healer named Varek Tesh, gray-scaled, one blind eye clouded with age, lifted his head as the ground above shuddered, not with impact, but with presence. "They are not here for us," he murmured to the room. "They are here because of us." And no one argued. From orbit, Admiral Vor Talem watched his command grid dissolve. Every attempt to regroup failed. Every order issued was garbled, rerouted, ignored, not by malice, but by futility. His ships responded to nothing now. His authority was being unmade in silence. One of his last operational cruisers, the Naxier, broke formation and tried to fold space, igniting its FTL drive at the system's edge. Before it could disappear, a field enveloped it, a shimmering veil like liquid glass. The jump drive cycled but didn't activate. It wasn't destroyed, it was held, then released. The Naxier spun helplessly as its drive shut down mid-sequence. Its crew had no idea why. Down on Varn 9, the Watchers didn't know the names of the ships, or the battles being fought above. They only saw the sky clearing. The flames that had devoured the upper sectors were dimming now, not extinguished, contained, reducing. The cloud banks peeled back. The air was still scorched, the ground still bleeding, but the panic had stopped. Because someone had answered the call. No one heard the humans speak, not a single word came from them. But their presence spoke louder than any proclamation. They were not allies, not conquerors, not saviors. They were balance, returning. In the city square, where statues had once stood before being melted by plasma strikes, the people began to gather. They simply came, silent, dust-covered, wounded. Eyes in the sky. Children pointed. Mothers wept without knowing why. Fathers stood still, their plates drawn tight, heads bowed, not in fear but in reverence. Elder Coven's voice came again, louder this time. They waited. For all this time, they waited. Not to rule, not to punish, but to remember. And now, so must we. And in that silence, the Hirathi remembered what it meant to be seen by something greater and not be afraid. And overhead, as if in response, a dozen more human ships broke from low orbit and climbed into the upper layers of atmosphere. They didn't fire. They didn't descend. They simply stood watching. From horizon to horizon, Varn 9 was ringed. The coalition had not been defeated by force. It had been defeated by memory. And across the planet, among the broken and the brave, the Hirathi began to understand. The legends were true, and they were alive. Above Varn 9, As silence settled over the battered skies and the last echoes of retreat faded into empty channels, the Coalition fleet hung fractured in orbit. What had begun as dominance was now a question without structure. Inside the command cores of their greatest vessels, lights still blinked and consoles still hummed, but something deeper had broken, something no sensor could track. On the Atanax, Admiral Talum stood watching a battlefield where the war no longer obeyed his logic, unaware that the true dismantling had only just begun. The Atanax shuddered as another of its companion vessels went dark. No explosion, no external impact. Just silence, followed by the slow, flickering death of the Dramalan systems, one subsystem at a time. Inside the Coalition command chamber, panic was no longer beneath the surface. It was visible, audible. Tactical officers shouted over one another, fingers racing across their consoles, eyes wide with data that contradicted itself. Communications from Sector Gamma are echoing backward. Sensor loops are registering phantom signatures, awaiting clarification. We've lost predictive targeting on the upper arc. The AI can't calculate intercept paths. Admiral Vortalum stood at the center of it all, unmoving, pupils dilated. Behind his composure, he knew the pattern. He had studied hundreds of battle doctrines in his lifetime, but this wasn't a doctrine. It was a collapse. A voice called from the upper tier of the chamber. Commander Elgor Tareth, broad-shouldered, red-skinned, from the Here caste of Cernari. He'd fought in 7 campaigns and held the line against a Vorder swarm. He was shouting now. "We're not facing a fleet." Talum turned his head slightly. Tareth's voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't a fleet, it's a system. We're inside it, and it's closing around us." Out in orbit, above the war-scarred hemisphere of Var 9, the battlefield looked static. But closer inspection revealed movement, subtle, intentional, perfect. The human vessels, once aligned in a simple wall, had formed a lattice of influence. They no longer moved toward targets. They moved around them. Coalition cruisers rotated in place, trying to adjust. One destroyer, Velgros, attempted a full-burn strafe toward the planet's dark side. Midway through the maneuver, its gravity coils buckled, not damaged, inverted. The ship folded halfway through the turn, one side pulling in a direction it no longer understood. Artificial gravity failed. Crew were pinned to walls, decks collapsed inward. Emergency protocols triggered, then shut off. The ship simply stopped functioning. Above the Coalition battle grid, a sensor blind spot widened, artificial, constructed, exact. 2 human ships shifted position by less than half a degree. In the center of that wedge, a Coalition capital carrier, the Ravenik, lost all external uplinks. Its hangar bay doors refused to open. Its ammunition loaders locked mid-cycle. Auto-targeting spun in a loop, unable to find a fix on objects that weren't cloaked, but absent from registered mass catalogs. A junior tactician on the Ravenik stared at the empty sensor grid, sweat dripping from his brow. "They're not invisible," he whispered. "They don't exist." Inside the Atinax, Sierra 7, the primary tactical AI, flickered through 11 processing cores. Data packets crashed, simulations failed, projections looped into recursive contradiction. The system paused, reset, paused again. "Strategic pattern unresolvable," the AI stammered. "Opponent velocity exceeds all forecast limits. Behavioral models invalidated. Rewriting. Talum's fist hit the console. "Shut it down." He turned to Creve. "Manual only. Full sensor sync. Target threats by proximity if necessary." "Sir," Creve said, struggling to maintain composure, "we can't even define what proximity means anymore." Across the chamber, Tareth stepped forward. "They're using gravity as a weapon." Talum turned, eyes narrowing. "Not to destroy," Tareth continued. "To reroute, disable, realign. Every time we try to move, we're moving wrong. They're shaping the field, space, inertia, density." "You're telling me they're changing physics," Talum snapped. "I'm telling you," Tareth said. "They understand ours better than we do." 3 more ships went offline. One was a command frigate. Another, a supply hauler with its own defense net. The last was the Marathon, a battle cruiser outfitted with deep core munitions and dark matter torpedoes. All 3 collapsed without combat. The Marathon's weapons powered up for a fraction of a second, then discharged harmlessly into null space, their trajectories reversed inside a field no Coalition tech could explain. The ship's thrusters ignited and pushed it backward. It drifted into a static field emitted by a nearby human vessel and simply shut off, like it had agreed. On the Atanax, voices dropped. Not from calm, but resignation. Officers lowered their heads to consoles. No one asked what was happening anymore. They asked if anything still worked. Talum watched the map shrink, not from scale, but from loss. Where once the Coalition ships had formed a defensive phalanx, now they were scattered, drifting, surrounded, isolated without being fired upon. "No contact," Creve said quietly. "We've lost fleet sync. No command chain left. No alerts, no alarms. Just the sound of a system watching itself fail." From the edge of the bridge, a voice emerged, low, bitter, tired. Silence held, not tactical, existential. Commander Tareth. He didn't raise his voice this time. He didn't need to. He just spoke the truth they all understood now. They know more about us than we know about ourselves. The last diagnostic blinked red on the Atanax's primary command display, then faded into black. No alarms followed, no new orders came. The bridge crew stood frozen, not in defiance, but in stillness. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to do. A command fleet that once defined interstellar order now drifted in orbital silence, surrounded but untouched, dismantled not by fire, but by precision. Commander Elgor Tareth stepped away from his station, breathing slowly, eyes locked on the tactical map that no longer moved. What had begun as a war had ended as a lesson, and the silence, once terrifying, now felt deserved. The human fleet ceased fire at once, not gradually, not unevenly. All systems halted in the same second, across hundreds of vessels, across thousands of kilometers. Turret arms folded back into hulls. Drones reversed course and disappeared into hangars. Point defense arrays dimmed. Navigation lights blinked out. Even passive sensors seemed to hold their breath. And nothing followed. No advance, no chase, no transmission. The Coalition ships that remained operational did not wait for permission. They turned. The Baryanth, a long-range cruiser with burn marks scarring half its hull, disengaged and fled toward the edge of the system. Then another, and another, like broken teeth scattering from the mouth of a shattered beast. None were pursued. The human ships remained perfectly still. In the sky above Varn 9, their presence still loomed, vast, silent, watching. But now they were motionless, sentinels without expression. Their formation pulsed faintly with micro-adjustments, maintaining absolute alignment like celestial instruments, as if their very geometry enforced the silence. Below, on the battered crust of Silurith, the fires had finally stopped climbing. In the ruins of the Temple of the Nine Flares, where ash coated the once golden floors, children and elders alike stood in the open. They stared skyward without speaking, their breathing slow, measured, as though afraid that a single word might wake the sky again. From the edge of the broken plaza of memory, Counselor Darek Malsin stepped out from beneath a collapsed shelter archway. His bark-hardened robes were torn and bloodied, but his posture was upright. He had no words, only his gaze, locked upward, where jagged silhouettes still circled like fragments of myth, refusing to fade. No Hyrathi spoke. No one ran. No one moved. And then, all across the planet, across every still-functioning data panel, every damaged relay, every open broadcast channel, screens flickered at once. Civilian comms went dark. Military encryption keys failed. Entertainment feeds dissolved into static. Even emergency override channels fell silent, overwritten before anyone could speak. And then a voice came. No face, no signature, just a voice, calm and cold. This was not an attack. It was a response. The words echoed through chambers and bunkers, ships and homes, temples and shelters, across the ruins of the Coalition fleet, across the depths of the surviving Hirathi network, through space, through silence. The message continued. Treaty, Era 1 Delta. Provisional Interference Protocol. Activation confirmed. Freedom has been violated. Intervention has been executed. This broadcast marks the conclusion of all tactical operations under the Return Directive. No reparations are owed. No negotiations will follow. To all dominant coalitions and hegemonies, this was not a demonstration. This was precedent. If freedom is threatened again, our response will scale accordingly. We do not seek alliance. We do not seek acknowledgement. We remember. We observe. And we have returned. The message ended. No flourish, no symbol, just silence again. And then the sky changed. One by one, the human ships began to vanish. No light, no flash, no warp trail. They folded inward, edges blurring like reflections on water drawn into a single point. Dozens disappeared in seconds. The rest followed in waves, not disorderly, not hurried. Each exited on a trajectory known only to itself, their departure coordinated but unspoken. And then, they were gone. Only the stars remained. In the aftermath, Varna 9 was quiet. The wreckage of the Coalition fleet still drifted in high orbit, a graveyard of ambition and calculation. No cleanup crews came. No salvage parties dared approach. Ships that had once carried diplomats, siege batteries, and weapons of mass compliance were now nothing more than markers, memorials to certainty undone. On the surface, the Hirathi rebuilt not out of celebration, but reverence. No statues were raised. No victory was claimed. In the plaza where Elder Reth Kovan had once knelt beneath the storm, children sat beside him now, watching the empty sky. The air was cool, clean, for the first time in days. In the silence, even the wind moved differently, slower, less defensive, as if it too had waited for the storm to pass. His voice, frail but firm, broke the silence. They were not gods, he said. The children looked at him. They were what gods fear. And the children said nothing. They understood. Elsewhere across the fractured continent, Hirathi survivors moved through ruins and wreckage. Some wept, some prayed. Others simply began to sweep ash from stone. Not to erase what had happened, but to clear the ground for something that might grow. And through it all, they looked up. Not in fear, not anymore, but with the quiet, powerful certainty that something ancient had awakened on their behalf and left without needing thanks. The legends were true, and they were alive. And somewhere beyond the stars, they were listening again. Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.